So thank you so much for joining us. Jyotsna Mohan Bhargava is with us today in this first edition of the In Culture Conversation. And she is a former journalist at NDTV who has worked for 15 years reporting on crime, sport, and entertainment. She is now an author, and the topic of today's conversation is this book, which has been getting rave reviews across the board, Stoned, Shamed, and Depressed, which, as the subtitle says, is an explosive account of the secret lives of India's teens. So, ma'am, what I first wanted to ask you was, were there any particular incidents, either personally or in public stories, that prompted you to sort of choose this topic to write about? Because it's very niche.
Yes, it is. And firstly, thanks for speaking to me, Karthik. I'm hoping that we'll reach a much wider audience of your age. This is an age that is particularly of interest to me, actually, because the kind of reactions that I've got from people of your age who are like still in college or just finished college has been phenomenal, actually. And the outpouring of agreement, in a sense, that I've got from people, but also in the early 20s, it's been just it's been unbelievable. It's like it's like a sequel waiting to happen, in a sense. But yeah, coming back to what I've been writing articles on this for the last 2 3 years, actually, before I started the research on the book. And the trigger was that my own daughter got bullied in school. And in a sense, a mix of body shaming and bullying, but physically bullied. And so I went back to digging into that as to has nothing changed. So I wrote my first article on bullying, and then I started picking up more and more around what is going on with children. In terms of the fact there's body shaming, so I wrote about that. Then I talked about the normalization of the word rape in school corridors, and along with that, I think I was also noticing, I have two kids, girls, and I was noticing that they around them kids who are 6 7 8, they're all hanging around with a smartphone in their hand, or they're all gifted an ipad. And so I was trying to actually, in a sense, connect the dots, whether these kids who get an iPad or a gadget so early are the ones who eventually land up to becoming these headlines, as I say about, whether it's the Snapchat bullying incident or it's the boys' locker room. Is there a connection? And I think lastly, of course, I figured that, this is a space which so much is coming out from, and yet we're not giving it the importance that it deserves. Even if we talk about, say, the boys' locker room, and we've all read it was the top headline for 2 days, 3 days, but no one's talking about it anymore, right? And it doesn't mean, as I dug in deeper to realize that it doesn't mean the issues have gone away. They're very much there. So my attempt has been to talk about things and bring out into a society that doesn't really, look too much into what happens with our young ones, and to tell them that just because they're young, it doesn't mean that the issues are not big enough. So it's been an attempt to bring that out, and I hope that someone out there takes notice.
And I find that the kids you've talked to have been very open and forthright in telling you their stories, which kind of surprised me because I would imagine that it would be sort of difficult to have them tell you things that are so personal to them. Because it's one thing for a kid to tell you what ghosting is, which is, a particular term about what a certain vape trick or whatever is. But when they're actually telling you about the body shaming experience they've gone to, or what it feels like to be addicted to substances, how did you manage to achieve that connection with them?
Karthik, I always say this whenever somebody asks me this question. I always say that, that therein is the biggest message that is through my book is the fact that, that this is a lot that is craving conversations. And I may have been a stranger to them, but the way they opened up their hearts and their souls to me has been phenomenal. Such intelligent, incredible children I have met. And by children, I mean even in their early 20s, right? They're children for me. But, such amazing children who have the capacity to do so much, who are also doing so much. It's not like, just having weed and not doing anything else with his life. He's doing such amazing stuff, talking about drug awareness, or, there's activism on body shaming, or, so that, I've been through, so that somebody else doesn't go through it, so they're creating awareness to a level that when we were your age, we could not even have thought about. And I think that's the striking part of the book, that so many of them came up to me, opened up their hearts. And I think even now when I am doing, when I'm doing the book promotions, and if I had like an Instagram live, so many of these young ones came up to me, and the only question was that, can you tell us how can we communicate with our parents? How can we tell our parents that we have issues? And I think that's what we really, that's what the message of this book in a nutshell, that I think communication is essential. They're just waiting. And I mean, if they can open their hearts to me, I mean, imagine what they would do with their own families. They want, see, I understand that, generations mein farak hota hai. I understand that. But I think your generation and, the younger ones, they're different in the sense of their acceptance to old Indian traditional, way of thinking is not the same as it was to us. Maybe a lot of us went along with the flow because we didn't have the kind of perhaps the exposure or the ability to stand up in a sense, right? I mean, and I think you have to give it to them that, they don't want to go the same route and they want acceptance to that. And I think that's where the struggle is at home. Just because we didn't see these things doesn't mean that these things don't happen. And I think a lot of families have to accept that.
But when you were actually reaching out to, like, what was the process like? I know when I went through the sources, it was about WhatsApp interviews, Facebook interviews, Twitter interviews. So how did you manage to, like, get the first connection with these students to begin with?
It's Karthik, it's a network, and I think like it's a whole world that opened up for me, frankly. And I started with children that I personally know, and friends, children personally really well, so that I trust them. I know that they're not going to be lying to me. I've known them since they were kids, and I spoke to them off the record in a sense that I spoke to them. I mean, the parents let them be. So it's not like I went through the parents. I told the parents I'm going to them, but I spoke to them separately and it was extremely confidential. So even if they're like my closest friends' children, my closest friends do not know these conversations. My closest friends do not know which one of them is their child. I had to respect that. We have respected that, and that's crucial when we're talking about minors, especially. And I think so it started with, children that I personally know, and then they just connected me and it just opened up. And, to give you an example, there's an incident that I talk about, and I'm not going to talk about which one here. And 3 different children came up and told me about that incident, and from different schools, different parts of the country. So it makes you think that, my God, the exposure, the way that news travels on social media is just so scary for this lot, for your lot, It's not something that is easy to cope. And hats off to that person, I mean, that person was just unbelievable. He stood by what he said. And I think but that's what I want to say, that news, everything is out in the open, and it's just that they're waiting for someone to speak to them. It's just a whole new world opened up for me, Karthik, and actually easily, very very easily, also goes to show that if somebody had come before me, they would have done the same.
And the thing that you just pointed out, that 3 people reached out to you about a particular incident. I also found that when reading the book, some of the stories, even though names have been changed here and there, I vaguely could recollect, okay, I've heard of this 2 years back. I've heard of this happening 3 years ago. Because I also went to a private school in Bangalore, and a lot of these stories were stories that I'd also heard of. But I'd say the big difference, and the thing that shocked me about this book was social media and the stories about social media. Because I grew up in a generation that I'd say 2-3 years above this one, but the social media boom didn't really hit my age, because I only got Instagram when I was in college. Facebook was pretty much a joking app when we were in high school. Yeah. But now it's much different. It's so much different for these kids. And I even had a discussion with a teacher who told me that, Karthik, for you, I'm 8 years older, but it was very relatable. Your batch was a lot like mine. But now the batch 2 years below suddenly seemed completely alien to me. So how much do you think that these social media apps have like skipped generations almost with these children? And
oh my God, like really how? Like really how? And even my elder child, she's just at the cusp of being a teen, but she's not on social media. So she tries, can I be on Instagram? And my answer is, so what? No. She's like, but I miss it, everyone's on it. And I keep telling her, I said, if you miss Instagram today, 2 years later, there's going to be a new app. It's as quickly as that things are getting churned out. Like I quote, in the book, I quote the creator of the Deep Nude app that went off, right? Yeah. And he says the very same thing. He said, if it wasn't me, it would be somebody else. That's how things are getting churned out so very quickly today. And it's a different world for them. It is really. And the young ones, they don't know any other existence. It's very, very sad. I have resisted the pressure. I've resisted the pressure of putting my kids on social media. And they kept saying, and right now I'm in the UAE, so TikTok is not banned here. But they kept saying, all their friends, the only thing they do over play dates is, they record TikTok videos. There is just nothing else. And to be honest, on a personal level, I love TikTok. Okay, and so one day, my kids came and they were really upset because then you feel ostracized and you feel left out, right? And they kept saying that nobody's, you don't let us go on anything. At least let us be on TikTok. It's going to be a private thing. And so my husband said, okay, we'll open a private thing for now and we'll see how it goes. But, you can only go to like the 2 friends or 3 friends or, here. And so then they got upset and they said, okay, forget it. We don't want to use it. And it just lay dormant. 2 days later, they came, and this is just a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, they came back and they said very quietly, they said, can you just delete our TikTok app? So I said, like, why, what's happened? And no, just delete it. So I let it be. In the evening, I broached it up again. And so they told me, and they said, these friends of ours, and these are friends. And again, they had private accounts, but, on TikTok, apparently suicide was live streamed on a private TikTok account. And now we're talking 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, It's a very hard world out there. They all want to be part of it, but I think it's our responsibility to tell them, I don't think we can react post the event. And I think a lot of, like I saw now, everybody's taken off the kids off TikTok, but I don't think they needed to be there at 10 or 9 already, right? But that's the word. And I think, unfortunately, it is harder to not giving right now. And there are very few people who would, take that. And because, they don't know anything else. They're born with the gadget. I mean, my child is not on Instagram, but if I tell her, can you tell me about IGTV videos, she'll do it like this, or else anything. And online studying right now during COVID has pushed even me back by many steps. So it's very hard, but they don't know any other existence. And unfortunately, they're getting that smartphone in their hands so very early. And I frankly see the smartphone as the genesis of a lot of issues.
It's interesting you bring this up because in the book, a lot of the conversation is around peer pressure. But what I've noticed that's sort of implicit and what you've just brought out is there's a certain parental pressure to it as well. That parents need to say that, oh, the other kids have the smartphone, the other kids have Instagram, the other kids have TikTok. So they feel obligated to give their kids that.
Yeah.
So how would parents sort of break this? Like, how are they supposed to break the chain and refuse?
I really, to give you another example, again in the book, there's this mother of 3 sons, and the eldest is, I think he's almost 16 and he doesn't have a phone. And, the age of 12, 13, 14 was awful. It was awful for him. It was awful for her because he was the only boy not having it. And, but she persisted and she persisted and she had really bad moments, feeling awful about herself and am I doing wrong? But I think now at 16, now he turns around and he says, I am so very glad that you didn't give it to me because he's become like this most amazing guitar player, okay? And he's like, now if I saw what all the other kids were doing, I would never have gotten into this. So like I say, it's harder not to give in. And the bottom, like my husband always says, I'll get the challenges too, it's like a dam that's waiting to burst in a sense, right? It's on us for how long we can just keep pushing that water in. And I actually feel that there's enormous difference even of 6 months between like 14, 15, 13, 14, So a child who's getting into social media at 11 versus somebody who's getting into 15, there is such a vast difference because challenges are from all over. And now we can't just say it's all happening in the Western world. We can't just say these predators don't happen. It's happening. It's happening through gaming. It's happening through social media. Everything is happening here. So, the older they are, the better, they're in a better frame to handle whatever comes their way. At least that's what I believe. They can't be completely off it. That's not an option. And I think the other way is to keep them busy. Unfortunately, COVID is, as I said, messed everything up. But yeah, I've written, Karthik, I've written this book outside badminton courts and gymnastics stadiums. That's how I've written the book. I know people go to the Himalayas to write, but I have written sitting on the floor outside a room, 5 days a week. I could do it. I think many people can do it. It's just easier to give in. That's my point. And it's and we're doing them a disservice because we're also giving in without A, we're giving them unrestrained freedom. B, we're not telling them about cybersecurity because I don't think as parents we are really equipped ourselves to understand the ramifications right now. I think our generation, for us also, it's a new toy. And I say this even for myself. I'm not the most tech savvy person, but unfortunately, that's not good enough right now if we have children. I think as parents, we need to be more tech savvy. We need to be the ones telling our kids that, these are the things that happen. This is how you can go around it. These are the cyber safety norms that you must keep in mind. And I think the older a child is, he'll be better able to understand what goes on.
It's interesting. I mean, it's sort of the way you describe it that, when your parents give you your first drink or something, they know what the danger of this is, and they sort of try and explain to you what's wrong with this. But that couldn't happen over there because they learned it after we did, and that seems to be the prevailing problem. But there are particular instances within social media that I found that I had no idea about. But one was sad fishing, which was about when kids are posting online to sort of garner sympathy when it may be a bit exaggerated. But I feel in a society where mental health is given almost no attention, how are we ever supposed to distinguish what an actual cry for help is versus what could be construed as sad fishing?
Yeah, I find this extremely tricky, very, very tricky. And, even now when, this whole Sushant Singh Rajput is in a sense tried to, focus a little bit again on mental health, although we went around everything but mental health. But, in the last 1 month, say there's been a little bit talk about mental health again. But again, when you notice, we're not talking about the young ones. We just don't talk about the young ones. We're talking about mental health epidemic. Well, I've been on these shows where we've discussed mental health, but again, it's been about the older generation. And that is really sad because I think this, I've written about, I think 15 to 19 is the age group where suicide is the biggest cause of death. And we're just not talking about it. If we're not talking about it, how are we going to teach our children? How are we going to help? Because we're not equipped, we're also not going to be able to understand the difference whether a child is shamming or whether a child genuinely needs help or whether, we can handle that situation at home. We're not in that zone at all. We're not even at the starting point. Unfortunately, things are so bad right now. I feel like, so many children came up and said that, all I need is a counselor. Sometimes I don't want to speak to even my best friend. But as a society, we don't encourage that. I don't know where to go. Schools, again, apart from sex education, I think counseling they need to up that game. Perhaps to an extent they have slightly, but I think simultaneously the issues have gone up as well. So I think we're back to square one. But I think social media has just exploded the mental health issue even more. And sad fishing, I feel like these are children who have who then of course they don't know where to go offline, that they have to talk about their issues to strangers online. And then again, it can come back to haunt them because young ones, they're not the most sensitive children. I mean, school kids, we all know, everyone's not, perhaps even I wasn't, right? We're okay. We joke about, we make fun of children. So what is going to happen? They're going to turn around and say, ye to pagla hai. Ye to pagal hai. Isko to ye problem hai. And that's the kind of thing that our society has normalized in a sense that, it's also something that we're learning from our homes. And unfortunately, it all filters down. So I think this is something we really badly need to relook. It's that school. I think the training needs to start at school, because if it's not happening in our society, I think children today are so are smart enough to understand. Like I can tell you, the last couple of years, when my child has gone to school and come back during Diwali time, I said, no, we're not bursting crackers, because that's the lesson they're learning in schools. They're learning that, let's make it a green Diwali. They understand that was a tradition, but they said, no, we're not going to burst, which is why I feel that, if schools could just up their game, there's just so much of a difference they can make now.
I find with that, the thing where I see schools struggling the most, this is from conversations with my former teachers, is when you had also brought up sexting, which is when students are sort of sending each other naked pictures without really understanding the ramifications of those. Now, as someone who is working within a school, how are they supposed to jurisdict this matter? Because it would be awkward or weird for them to sort of invade a student's privacy by looking at their social media profiles. And it's even stranger for them to broach this topic, because then the parents will be like, why are you teaching us, our kids, about stuff that they are obviously doing, but they don't want the school to say that the students are doing this.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I'm not putting everything on the schools, mind you, because, while I think that sex education and we need to up the game, we need to talk about consent a lot more. And of course, counseling. There are certain other ways in which the schools and educational institutions, their hands are tied because, parents have become that playground politics, as I talk about, parents who get into everything that involves their children without letting their children figure it out. So what that is doing is when parents keep landing up in the school, it puts the school authorities on the back foot. So, now there so many school principals have told me that they're actually worried. They don't want to get into this mess with parents because they said that if you bring it up with the parents, what happens is the parents get aggressive, they don't believe us, and then it just leaves a really bad taste in the mouth. So a lot of these schools are now just preferring to keep things calm. They don't want to bell the cat in a way, and unfortunately it's tricky, right? I mean, how do you handle minor consent? How do you deal with stuff like that? So there are a lot of things that we really need to look into, but I think talking consent in itself is a priority. As a society, we haven't spoken about it, we don't speak about it. Consent, misogyny, these are issues that are, I mean, you see it in the boys' locker room, you've seen it in the Mumbai WhatsApp case. What's going on? I mean, why are children who have everything on a platter talking like this? It's obviously coming from a society that allows them to speak like this, that does not take enough action against those who speak like this. And it's been the way forever. And unfortunately, I think we're at crossroads now. This generation is saying we're not happy with the way things are. And I think it's up to the older generations to understand that and try and, say that, okay, this is how we've been. But just because it's been like this traditionally does not always make it right.
There is another prevailing trend is that there's sort of a dissonance between this younger generation who've adopted a more progressive Western set of values towards their parents who are still stuck in a more conservative mindset. But I feel another big thing about mental health that I want to discuss was something that I think India does discuss about mental health is mental health with regard to examinations and cutoffs. There are plenty of movies, whether it's Three Idiots or Chichori, that discuss the ramifications of mental health when it comes to, setting unrealistic expectations on children. And in one part of the book, I think the kid's name was Ritika, who you discussed, where she had achieved a 97, but that still wasn't enough for her. And you'd also gone on to say that the expectations weren't even set by her parents, but by herself as well. And even when I'm talking to kids these days, they're telling me that, it's not our parents who are doing this. We want to be at that level, and anything lesser than that is a failure on their part. So how do we sort of tell these kids that it's okay to, not be 100 on 100 student?
Yeah, I think this is coming from that whole thing of everything is so instant in this generation, whether it's instant gratification, it's quick validation, everything it needs to be the very best as they see it. It may, it may not be the best as we see it. I mean, I tell my child every time, I say, please don't get that 100%. I do not want to see 100% here. But I still know that I'm still a minority because, even whatever the kids say that they want to do it for themselves. The board exam results this time, and my Facebook was flooded with parents who were talking about their children getting 95 plus. I cannot tell you, I went off Facebook because I couldn't hack it. And so that unknowingly that pressure does come in. Because they're anyway dealing with the peer pressure from social media where, you've all got to be Miss Popular. Like, if you don't get that 97%, you're going to pop in some pills, or you don't get into the student council, you're going to pop in some pills. Or, if you don't look pretty, you're going to drink some phenyl. The pressure in everyday life is, in any case, so much. I mean, I talk about that child, who topped the school boards, I think in his school. And after that, his brothers don't speak to him because they feel like he's up the game, and that pressure, he's considered the nerd. So this word nerd, I'm sure you've heard of it. I went to a friend's house, and their daughter's room had this thing saying nerds not allowed. What are we doing? I mean, we've just classified in people into, and I think this is all the pressure that actually comes from us. I mean, why must we always win the spelling bee? Yeah, you tell me why. Again, another Indian. I mean, let it go. Just let it go, but we don't know how to let it go. And unfortunately, I really believe that the children are learning from us. I don't think it's just themselves. I think this is how they're brought up. This is the expectations that come even from well-off families. They're expected to do well, to even take over the family business or to go to university abroad. So the expectations are there for everybody, whether you're higher level, lower level, middle level. The expectations, they're different expectations. I think for a lower middle level, the expectations are more aspirational. You want them to get into something that you couldn't do in your time, be that engineer, be that doctor, or even go into reality shows and be famous. Those reality shows with kids dancing, singing, that's middle class India, frankly. So I mean, the expectations are all around us, Karthik.
Oh, another thing that really shocked me was something that I feel might be a bit of a minority, and that is the toy room incident and plastic surgery. So I was just wondering, was the sample size, I mean, obviously the sample size for this had to be a very elite minority of students who come from uber wealthy families, but two parts then. In general, were the people you were talking to coming from a very privileged background? Was it an even mix? And secondly, with regard to those two particular incidents, where were that seems like an instance of parental failure, like at least to me, because how are kids being allowed to get a lakh to drop at a club or a lakh to augment a certain part of their body with the parents' approval?
Yeah, so no, I have actually spoken to children who go to good schools, but I'm not talking, like top of the line. These are the good schools of today. So, these are average kids whose parents, double income parents we've all got gadgets in our house, right? I mean, but it doesn't mean that they're traveling by a private jet. And so it's that kind of children. And even when it comes to, plastic surgery and all, a lot of them are normal kids. But again, that whole thing of being something else on social media, you're pestering your family to give in, and then they just say, okay, it's just you go to your parents and it's just one time 10,000, but it's never a one time 10,000, right? You come back 6 months later, 1 year later, and it becomes a process. But a lot of these families are giving in. Either they're giving in because they've gotten fed up of that constant pressure, please, and at some point you just give in, or they're just giving in as like I say, they're aspirational. The toy room incident, though, is a little different in the sense that, again, that these are batches of children. So like I said, even in the book, if one has money, that one person will take 5 people along. And these 5 people will then go and then, and there are other ways to augment that money, right? You are betting in the matches, you are hacking into accounts, you're selling those accounts very, very big. So you're selling accounts and earning money. And then you're getting, and if 4 people are doing that, you have an enormous kitty, whether it is to go out drinking or whether it is to do drugs. Very, very different ways of earning money these days, Karthik. I mean, that doesn't always have to be the parents.
The level of ingenuity itself is impressive.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I think there's a tendency maybe to downplay just how smart kids are when they're 15 to 18 years old. These people are the ones who are constantly finding more loopholes, more ways to break rules. But another thing that I felt that I personally had a bit of an issue with was the part of the book when you were discussing hip hop culture. And I know that there was hip hop culture.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know that there was you made a reference to Kendrick Lamar, Pulitzer Prize winning artist. And I also loved the pun at the end when you said that we should do our 50 Cent to keep an eye. But I feel that the problem over here, would you say that it's more on the condition these kids find themselves in as opposed to the culture itself? Because throughout like the past 50 years of popular music, popular musicians have always been, indulging in drugs, glorifying sex, glorifying, things that we consider vices. But is it really fair to attribute hip hop as something uniquely problematic that our children are now latching on to?
No, you're right. Let me tell you, I'm a big fan of hip hop culture. Okay, big fan. Like my younger one learns hip hop. Okay, she takes classes in hip hop dancing, And I always say that if in my time there were hip hop classes, I would have taken them as well. So yeah, I think that this generation has not understood hip hop. They've taken it at a superficial level, and they've taken what they want from it. And it's the bling, it's the good life, it's the abusive words, it's the coolness of it that they've taken, but they've not really gone into the depth of it. But they really do swear by it. They swear literally and figuratively by it. So yeah, no, I do agree with you. I think that they think that this is the way they should be. This is how it's supposed to be. It's cool. Let's get on with it. And and then the money thing, it attracts them to have lots of money. That big party culture, it's very them. It's very them. And I think that's what I say. Perhaps it's not the culture. It's just the superficial level of the kind of hip hop that they want to take out of it versus what really is all about.
So when
And
you
it's so many of them. They tell me, you don't understand hip hop culture. I was like, you'll be shocked to know I do. I really do. And it wasn't invented yesterday, right? So, but this is their take on it. It's very different.
It's interesting you say that. So what I'm getting at is that these children, when you ask them about their aspirations, was wealth something that really fascinated them? Was that something that most of these kids sort of aspired to do in life or achieve in life? Just this idea of being wealthy, this idea of being able to throw lavish parties and wear fashionable clothes and that lifestyle.
I'm a bit worried because I think this generation has so much potential, so much potential. But like we always joke about the millennials and say, the millennials are not going to get a job like I got for 15 years, or that they're just going to perpetually rent a house. I mean, I've got nephews who are almost millennials, and they still haven't learned how to drive a car because why do we need a car? We'll just Uber it, right? And I keep wondering, I mean, if this is one step worse, and with so much potential, are you just going to let things be? And that's the worrying part of it. But I think again it falls back on us as to how as adults we can harness it for them and show them the way, because they're just unbelievably talented people out there doing so much with their lives if they can just get it right. It's just that the most talented person will also be smoking weed simultaneously, so there's like a dichotomy happening here, because and they say, and I get that, I mean, the person who's a front bencher would also be smoking up just like the back bencher. There's no division like in our time. So that's the good boy of the class and that's the bad girl of the class kind of scene. So it's really hard, and I think their struggle is to be accepted as they are, and I think a lot of issues would get sorted if we give them that little leeway. I'm not saying too much because I think we need to push back as well. But I think that little acceptance that we don't want to be what our parents were. We don't want to blindly follow traditions and customs. And yes, I mean, a very, very, sexually permissible generation, in a sense that, again, peer pressure though comes in a lot, that, we don't want to, we want to lose our virginity because, it's the cool thing to do. So it's very hard keeping them sane as well. I think, a lot of counselors say that, they're getting attacked from many, many sides right now. The peer pressure is unbelievable. It's nothing like we've ever seen in our times, which is why it's hard for us to understand. But I think baby steps, if we understand that, we've got to give in a little bit more, but, without them noticing that we're also taking in a little bit back. I think that is the way forward. But to blindly say that, oh no, these things don't happen. And I've seen so much of it while researching this book, Karthik. I mean, I've gone to relatives. I've been on a Zoom call with my extended family. And when the first thing they did was they asked me, what is the book about? And my kids brought up the book and they said, my younger one's like, it's about stone, shame, depression, it's about sex and everything. There's been drop silence. And I mean, my cousins who were living, in Singapore and the US and this, oh, let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to. And hands like this. And these are educated people, right? I mean, I go to somebody else and I said, I believe there was a case in your school, in your kid's school, where a couple was asked to leave because they were found to be intimate. And her instinctive reaction was, oh no, let's not talk about it. These are controversial things. And these are just two out of the many similar reactions I've got. We are not helping our children if we keep, if we sit up like an ostrich. Honestly speaking, we cannot. The times are very different. The times are very hard. It's very hard being a parent as well. But this blind think of I'm going to a mother, and I said your child is in class 12 of a school where the principal has told me that every child is vaping in class 12, and I said, so does that child know about vaping? I did not ask her, does that child vape? I said, does your child know about vaping? No, not at all. What are you saying? My child has no idea. And I said, why don't you ask him? No, not at all. He has no clue. And a friend of mine, she said, another friend, and I said, listen, can I speak? She said, of course. And she's very open, so she knows what's going on. And she says, I won't say it, you ask him. And I called him, and he was having Coke. He's, in class 10th, and he was having Coke. And I said, listen, hey, you, come here. Do you know about vaping? And that Coke went all over the room because, he did not expect that question coming from auntie, right? And they don't know. So to think that they don't know whether they're involved or not is a different ballgame. Everybody knows what's going on. And to think and pretend otherwise is doing them a great disservice right now. Really. Very complicated.
I felt that a lot of times, even in schools, there are supposedly very, progressive, privileged schools that are supposed to get your kids into good colleges. There's a sentiment where the principal and the teachers gear you towards what they think you're going to be good at. But there's never the question asked by them towards the child as to what they want to do, or where do your interests really lie? What do you see yourself doing? It's always, oh, you seem to be getting a 96 in math ICSE. I think you should do ISC math and do the same thing. So I was just wondering, in your conversations with these kids, did they ever tell you, or did you ever ask them where they want to be in life? Like, what do they see their future as? And I know it's hard for kids to obviously think about college and post-college life, but just if there was any visualization of that.
No, but it's true. I totally agree with you because it's a sense I get even not just from schools, but I get it from families as well. That, you're telling your child that you must come first in class, but do you even understand whether that child has the ability to score that much or not? It's immaterial. It's immaterial because you need to get your child to get that 90. I mean, they say what 100% cut off in 3 subjects in LSR. I mean, it's ridiculous. Our system, it's coming from everywhere. Right? I mean, CBS, I put a lot on CBSE. What kind of marking is it that when you're getting 100% in English literature? I've done English literature, right? I know. And I'm amazed, at how, so it's a combination. It's families, it's society, it's schools. We're all together. We have never understood where the kids are coming from, As I say in my book, a kid may want to sing, but you send them to dance, right? Because that's what you want them to do. Have we ever asked our children what they want to do? And I think that a lot of them told me, that this is not what we want to do. I mean, they talk about this, using drugs as an experience enhancer for everything. And I questioned this child who at 13 was having marijuana, and I said, so what is it that you need to go to the movies and why do you need to have marijuana as an experience enhancer? Why is it that the movies are just not good enough? And, the answer was like, most of us do this because there's a void inside us. And I found that a little telling, that none of us would delve into these issues if we didn't feel that there was something missing. And I think something missing is where we need to sit back as families, as society, as parents, and wonder why are we pushing them? I think there's a little bit of a trend, but it's that occasional in 30 students, it'll be that one parent who will say, I don't care if my child got a 66%. Yeah. But I think generally, like I said, after the board, 95, 97, so excited, my child has done it. Did your child want to do it? We've never asked them. Does your child not want to maybe do art? Or, you're going to send them into science. So many children, I mean, so many people in my generation, Karthik, I see like a course correction now, CAs who just left their jobs, who've now gone into farming. I've got my own cousin. I mean, he has a massive, CA firm. He's quitting everything and he's going off to Canada because his daughter is going to vet school. And, he said, I'm just going to open a farm again. And this is not the only person who's opened a farm, So many people who've left it, become artists, left their good MBA jobs. We never asked.
I feel like the point you brought up earlier was very telling, that it's a sense of fulfillment that's missing. And I think that they feel a certain gratification when the Instagram post gets 200 likes or something, when they start to get a boost of Twitter followers.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, do you think that parents and schools are not providing students with sufficient areas or avenues where they can actually feel like they have fulfilled something? Because oftentimes winning a tournament, that doesn't do it for them. It's the Instagram post that's what's most important. But for instance, when we were in school, everything was geared towards, okay, are we going to win this next cricket tournament? Are we going to win this football
Yes.
tournament? There was some aspiration towards goals, tangible goals that we set. Do you think that schools are not valuing that as much anymore?
I don't know. Did they even, I think schools are also stuck in a bind. They're also trying very hard to. It's. I'm telling you, this generation, the parents are not easy to handle for schools as well. So where can they go from here? I mean, if they say something that is not going as per school issues, then the parents are at the gate. So where do they go from here? I think it's very tricky for schools as well. I think. To give you an example, I mean, when we're talking about how things have changed, my kids, they've been very sporty. I've made sure that they were really sporty. We were sporty as kids, and I've encouraged that. So they were, as I said, they played badminton and pretty decently, school team and everything. And now and gymnastics, and now because of the COVID, they both love dancing. So they do a lot of dancing mixed with gymnastics. And they were talking to me and they said something. So if it's between, what would you tell me to do? Because I was telling her that one of the courts is opened, and now since you're 12, you can go. And so she said, "Well, you're not sending me for gymnastics, because when I asked you, can I go gymnastics? Dance is also opened. Sorry, can I go there? You said no." So my thinking was, badminton court is just the two people playing. It's a big place, it's a small thing. But she again took it as you're imposing your views on me. I prefer dancing now to badminton. Why are you forcing me? And I had to immediately step back, because yes, I mean, you've got to let them be. But but I think sports is very, I think there are people who are interested in sports. I think it also comes from, again, their families. If you play, if you're sporty, your children will automatically get there. But again, like kids that I've spoken with who said, they were playing soccer and, they were very interested in their football team, or, horse riding team. And then, they realized they had no friends. And because nobody else was doing it. So what do? They go into doing what everybody else is doing, which is gaming, or sitting inside on social media. And then it's that the balance is just very hard on you. As a kids have to be very strong mentally themselves right now. They have to be able to take it, from all directions. But I think that it's worth it. Because when, like, the boy who learned the guitar, at 16, if I mean, I remember my times, if the thrill of winning a tournament, there's nothing like it. And I've seen my kids when they were playing tournaments and winning a match, it was, I mean, that they forgot everything else under the sun. And I think it still holds true. But I think we're just not, we adults are also so into our own lives, and maybe social media is so interesting for us as well, that we forget to, show them options.
I feel gaming is an interesting topic in that sense, because it does provide them a sense of fulfillment, right? Because if they win the game, then there obviously is that immediate gratification. But it also provides them a sense of detachment, because people who are socially isolated, they find a home through this virtual world with other people, or with whatever random gaming community they manage to find. And I think there are ways that gaming as an industry as well is growing, and people are actually starting to prioritize electronic sports as a viable industry. Do you think there's a way for parents to sort of moderate this onto their children? Because there is obviously, as you mentioned, there was one case that actually was almost satirical to me, which I think there was a 9-year-old child who was playing Fortnite, and he started to have nightmares and dreams after that. So there obviously are these extreme cases, but
and I personally know that child really, really well, really, really well. Like one of my closest friends' sons, actually. So yeah, and it's happening all around. And I think, and again, I say, and she's somebody who's really on the ball. But again, that was the peer pressure of he's playing because everybody's playing, so she let it be. But otherwise, she's somebody who's always around the children. What are you doing? What are you watching? And so I think, yeah, I mean, I've spoken about other people, who play in moderation, and I think it can be done again. you can't take it away, and you shouldn't. It's not. I mean, my kids play. I let them be once a week. Till they push it to twice, I let I'm not. I'm okay. Okay, okay. They're happy with the once a week, half an hour on iPad, play a game. Okay, I mean, it's not a complete no. We cannot be. It cannot be. We cannot take them out of their comfort zone. But again, we have to be really careful. We have to know what's going on. I mean, again, the same parents, they don't know what grooming is. I mean, they're like, but we know grooming is, what is it? Isn't it about turning out well? I mean, like, so if we don't know what's going on, how are we going to help our children? If we don't understand that, that leaving your mic open is leaving it open to many other issues, or, stuff like that, that they're just, gaming is, I'll be honest, I wrote it as my final chapter, Karthik, but, and because I thought it would be possibly the lamest of the lot, and, and I finished it, and I think my editor and I said, wow, this one is the most misunderstood or just underestimated of the issues. I think the other ones, we're still aware that, things could happen, at least they happen in the Western world, so to speak. But here, nobody understands. Everybody thinks, oh, I'm just playing on Fortnite, or just my kids just playing PUBG, children. It's very, very big here now. It's on a rise, and unfortunately, we don't understand half of it.
Yeah, it's very easy to get lost into it, because it's sort of like the social dilemma itself. That I think video gaming occupies a similar space that it sucks you in. But I feel a lot of the issues in this book could be summed down to larger societal issues, parental issues, our cultural issues that have sort of trickled down to kids who are now at edge or at war with them. But I think one issue that is problematic within youth culture that I personally saw in my high school and in a lot of other private schools is that there's a certain trend where apathy is seen as something cool and aspirational. Where the coolest people in school are the ones who shun you for trying, the ones who don't do anything per se. Was that a trend that you could identify as well?
Yeah, I think apathy is very, very big, very, very big. Apathy and aggressiveness, both, very big. And I question them, and I say why, and also along with it, angst, so much angst. And I think I asked every single child that I met, I said, why is there so much angst in your generation? I don't understand. I mean, I've tried to understand you, I've tried to do right by you, but I don't understand this angst of, the world is against us, it's constantly against us. So let us, just slit our wrists, or let us overdose. And it's so casual. Self-harm is just so casual that it's shocking, right? But yeah, otherwise there's this complete apathy. Nobody is anybody's friend, and the irony, right? You're making so many followers. I've got this many, I've got that K thing against my Insta followers, and yet you don't have a real friend. You don't have people that you can actually have face-to-face conversations with, because this generation is not doing it. Everything is behind that anonymity. It lets them be whatever they want to be, and they're in a sense living it up. And I think that's the scary part, because they don't know where to take it and where it will take them. And this aggressiveness that is coming out, because people I personally know, again, 13-year-olds, that the police has been called. Somebody's reported them to the police. It's that bad. And this is the generation that is just, I don't understand. You've been given everything. So they're really on edge. But again, like I said, if you're giving them that gadget at 6, 7 to try and take it away at the age of 12, 13, it's not going to work. It doesn't. And a lot of Indian parents are trying to do that. That, I think, is one of the biggest mistakes we're making now. We've given it in because it was easy. Taking it back is very, very tough. Very, very tough. They're used to it. Now it is the way of living. It is who they are, whether they're hiding behind the anonymity, or whether they're playing who they are, whether they're cyberbullying, sexual bullying, hacking. So much is going on. Just so much is going on. And they're pros at it, unfortunately,
Yeah, I know you've mentioned that this is not a parenting book, and that your goal with this book is to sort of show a mirror and expose the real what is happening with our youth today. But if you were compelled to say that because of all this research you managed to do and accumulate, if you had any prescriptions for parents now to sort of, break down their kids, to help them understand how to better connect with them, to better understand what social media is, and understand how to, stop bullying, to give their kids some sense of fulfillment, all these various issues.
I have, okay, so this is completely my personal view, right? Firstly, conversations. Conversations. You have to have as many conversations as you possibly can with your children. Open it up. Communication to me is the key. And I think this generation between the parents and and the children, there is lots less conversation, whether they're sitting on the dining table, someone's got a gadget, someone's watching TV, or whether everyone is tired. We're all tired, everyone is running. I get that, but I think we don't have a choice. Firstly, I think we have to open it up. And then we have to normalize the existence of things. We have to normalize that things happen around us so that we can demystify them. We can take away the stigma. We can, take away the taboo from it and allow children to understand that just because things happen doesn't mean that we have to get involved with them. To give you an example, I've been very open in my house. We've been very open. Everything is discussed. My younger one's just 8, but the book, it was an open book, But so for my elder one, I think in class 6, when, there was a vaping case that happened, and she came and she said, 3 boys have been asked to go on leave because they were caught vaping. It's not like she came and she was shocked, or she was, she's asking me what is vaping, or she's quickly, behind us, our backs, going onto the internet to find what is vaping. She knew everything because we had normalized it. We had normalizes. She understands that vaping happens, that kids do vaping, that it's not the right thing to do. Depends, we're too young. There's a time and age for everything, perhaps, right? She may do it later, but she understands right now things happen. We just go around them. We understand they happen. We don't have to get involved, And I think the other thing is to learn to say no. I think no is very, very important. I think we don't say enough of it. And I've said that again in my book where, Steve Jobs says that, unfortunately, you piss off a lot of people when you say no, but you've got to say no. We don't, we give that, why else have we given that gadget at the age of, 5, 6? We could have said no. We don't say it. So I think to me, these are the answers. And like I said, keep pushing your child. Don't have to give social media at the age of 10, 11. There's absolutely no need. There's really nothing they're missing. But you've got to balance it out. A little bit of gaming, or maybe, it's tricky. We've got to be there, we've got to give them more attention, and it's exhausting. But I think in the longer run, that's what works.
Yeah, the more and more I read the book, the more and more I was grateful that my parents used to say no a lot. And
they did. I think they did well then.
But no, yeah, it's there's a lot to learn from this book, I think. And thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. It's available online, and I would encourage everyone who is even my age to go out and buy this book, because there's so many things that I had no idea about before I read it that I'm now learning about after reading it. And I thought I knew everything about youth today. So just before we end, is there anything you'd like to say to your fans, publishers, anyone?
No, I'm really to my publishers for their greatest support, and my editor, she's been phenomenal. Anybody who has her, they'll be blessed, because that's I've worked in the media for a very long time, so I know I've met all kinds of bosses. So unfortunately, I've had 2 amazing bosses as well. So I started off with the right boss, with Achima. She was my boss when I first started working, my first job in VITV. She now works. She's very senior in Berlin and Deutsche Welle, and then Prannoy was, the most amazing person that you can possibly work under, and still so encouraging. It's been a while since I've gone off, but the kind of support I've got from my friends from NDTV, it's been unbelievable. So I say, yeah, go with what makes you happy. I've changed a lot. I start so I come from, I'm a 4th generation journalist, okay, and 3 generations before me, everyone was a print. Sorry. Everybody else was a print journalist, and so I was very clear that I'm going to go into print. And at the age of 17 is when I wrote my first article, and I wrote it, Hadse. And I put it in an envelope, and I wrote it, sent it to the editor. I think it was the Hindustan Times, and I just sent it. And I forgot about it. And my grandfather came running one day and it had made the middle of the newspaper. Okay, because a piece I wrote on, I lived through militancy in Punjab, so it was something else was getting to me and I wrote it. So I thought, okay, this is my thing in 17. And then I finished college and I said, okay, but everyone's young. TV was just coming up and, TV was paying more than print was. So I said, okay, let's give it a shot. And so I've taken like a 15-year detour to come back to writing. And I enjoyed every bit of it. I've done print, I've done TV, I helped launch a digital news startup. So I've pretty much seen it all. And I think, we're not too old to changing and, go with what works for you. I think there are no hard and fast rules. No one's, we're all young, we're all old, we're all the same. I think, it makes no difference. I mean, there's so many young people, everybody keeps telling me that are coming into our media line, but I'm fine, be confident in your space. And now I've written a book and at the age of 47. So, something new maybe at the age of 48, 49, keep going with it and, whatever makes you happy, whatever actually is self-fulfilling, that's very important, And yeah, so I was the book came at a right time for me because I was, wondering where to go from here. And so I think it's opened up for me, and I'm really glad I wrote it. But more importantly, I hope that it, like I said, I hope it allows people to make an informed choice going forward. That's the idea behind it. I mean, I'm no one to give anybody my opinion on how they should bring up their children, but it's been an attempt to show you the mirror, show the society a mirror, and take it forward from there, because I think there are conversations that are desperately needed to be had, whether it's drugs or mental health. And mental health, my God, we really need to start talking about mental health in, teenagers and early 20s. And yeah, these are issues that I hope now that I can take it forward in a sense and, start these conversations on another platform. So let's see how it goes.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's a lot of valuable insights into this book for people of all ages, I would say. So I hope everyone goes out and gets a copy. Thank you so much.
Please do.